My contribution: I'm on an on-call victim support team, so I often end up at the hospital at odd hours. This was around 4 a.m. I just finished doing my thing, and I was sitting in my car in the parking lot, collecting myself and writing notes for my report, when I see someone out of the corner of my eye. I clearly saw the blue of a hospital gown, but when I looked over, no one was there. I figure I'm just tired and riding out the adrenaline of the call, so I go back to doing my thing. After a few minutes, I once again spot something out of the corner of my eye. This time when I look up, someone is there. Standing on the curb in front of the hospital, I see a man in his mid to late 50s. Thin hair up top, no facial hair. He's wearing a hospital gown and holding on to something metal, but from my angle, I couldn't tell if it was an IV pole or a crutch. He wasn't leaning on it. He had this expression on his face of wide-eyed shock with his mouth slightly open, like he was trying to think of something to say and had totally stalled out. At this point, I start glancing around for staff or something because this man doesn't look like he should be outside alone. His skin is a messed up pale color, and he's barefoot. I can't see his feet well with the shadows, but his hand and fingers look bruised. As I'm looking around for staff, our eyes meet, and I know he sees me. I start thinking, okay, this guy can't wander around alone, half naked and unmasked. I have huge chills, but I turn to grab my mask and get out of my car to help guide him back inside. When I look up again, he's gone. I looked all over the parking lot for him, but he was gone. There's no way he could have vanished like that in the split second it took me to grab my mask. I don't know how to explain this without sounding dramatic, but my skin crawled when he looked at me. He looked like a guy who was slowly realizing he died and didn't know what to do now. I still think about it. I worked at a school for emotionally disturbed children while attending college. The school housed adolescent girls and boys who had been removed from their horrific families. Each dorm had 2 child care workers per shift and housed up to 12 kids. At different times, I worked on both girls' and boys' dorms. I'm female. The boys were usually straightforward. If they wanted to hurt you, they just hauled off and punched you. The girls, oh my God, the girls, sneaky as fuck. On one of the girls' dorms, it was me and another woman. One of the girls hated this other woman. The girl would crawl into the top of her closet and lie on the shelf, waiting for this woman to come looking for her. She would then jump out of the closet on top of the woman and start hitting her. We took the kids to laundromats so they could do their laundry. These trips usually went pretty well, but one time a 14-year-old girl who was about 5 feet even and probably weighed 90 pounds decided she wanted to act out. She started throwing laundry detergent, getting in weaker girls' faces and threatening them, etc. My coworker and I had to restrain her to keep her from hurting the other girls. Now, restraining a child, something we had been trained to do, was never fun, but doing it in public as a special kind of hell. The goal is to take the child to the ground and hold their arms behind their backs until they calm down. So my coworker gets this surprisingly strong girl who she has 6 inches and 40 pounds on the ground, and I'm helping her get the girl's arms behind her back. No, you cannot actually hurt the child, so you have to be careful. Somehow my coworker let her arms stray too close to the girl's mouth, and the girl just sunk her teeth in my coworker's arm and held on for dear life. Blood was running from the wound. Now I'm trying to get the girl to stop biting. At this precise moment, 2 bystanders decide we are hurting this poor girl. They start screaming at us to let her go. They're going to call the police, blah, blah, blah. As calmly as I could, I explained the situation, pointed out that the girl had my coworker's arm in her mouth, and said if they didn't back off, the police would be visiting them for interfering with us doing our jobs. Once I mentioned the name of the facility, they backed off. We got the girl under control. I called for help from the facility, and we got the girl back to the dorm. My coworker went to the ER for the bite. Another time, a substitute child care worker thought it was a good idea to bring a butcher knife onto the dorm so she could cut a watermelon with it. I didn't know she had done this until it was too late. One of the girls decided it was time to act out, and she took the knife and was threatening other girls with it. This is where I walked in. I'd been checking on another child at the time. I arrived just in time to see the substitute child care worker tell the girl to give her the knife, holding out her hand in expectation. The girl basically sliced across the palm of the woman's hand and then ran outside with the knife, where she proceeded to stab the moonwalk, bouncy house, to death. I called the supervisor and then followed the girl outside to try and monitor her. After she stabbed the moonwalk to death, she broke one of our plastic windows and started smashing her wrist against the jagged edges, trying to cut herself. She still had the knife, but I don't think she really wanted to hurt herself. More staff arrived. We convinced her to drop the knife, and we restrained her and put her in the quiet room, which was a padded room with a door that had a window in it for observation. When a kid was in the quiet room, they had to be monitored every 15 minutes. Speaking of quiet rooms, my now husband worked on the boys' dorm. One of the kids acted out badly enough, danger to self or others, that my husband had to put him in the quiet room. The kid was small and didn't fight, so it seemed like an easy to my husband. He walked the kid into the room and then started backing out to close the door. Except the kid had hidden a cup full of pee behind the door, and he grabbed the cup of pee and flung it at my husband, catching him full in the face. Fun times. I actually met my husband at this job. He and I were working a 3 to 11 shift when the kids in all 6 dorms decided to riot. So 78 kids and about 15 staff. They were breaking windows, fighting each other, and fighting staff. You name it, and they were fucking it up. In the middle of all this, one girl on my dorm claimed to have imbibed her nail polish. I notified the nurse, and the girl maintained she drank the nail polish until the nurse told her she had to administer ipecac. For those of you who don't know, ipecac is a syrup that makes you vomit. It tastes pretty bad. The girl admitted she didn't drink the nail polish and showed us where she poured it out. She just smeared a little on her mouth. Honestly, I thought the nurse was going to make her drink the ipecac anyway. The riot started about 10 p.m. and the 11 to 7 shift, one person per dorm, showed up at 11 p.m. It took both shifts to get the kids settled down. The 3 to 11 shift finally got to go home about 1 a.m. As we were getting ready to leave, I turned to my now husband, a man I'd seen a few times before but did not know well, although he was friends with my roommate. Me. I'm going home to get drunk. Want to come? Him. Yes. We've been married for 35 years this May, and together for 40. Our children were reasonably well behaved. We never had to put them in the quiet room even once. made a 2-month internship at a very famous forensic hospital in Germany prior to my studies. Many patients there were in what we call Sicherheitsverwahrung in Germany. Basically, that means when a patient is too dangerous to be ever released, he stays in the prison or hospital after his sentence time. The hospital I worked in was separated in 2 sectors. The first was for acute psychotic patients. There you had the screaming, schizophrenic, and acute dangerous people. For example, when you got stuck on an acid trip and killed someone, you came there. Some of the patients there were relocated relatively fast to normal psychiatric hospitals. The second one was mostly for patients who were already locked in for several years. They appeared not as obviously insane like the others, mostly because their medication was adjusted really well during the time. That's the place I worked in. We had a lot of pedos there, but they were more pitiable, to be honest, and not really dangerous or creepy. They got medication which suppresses their libido. As a side effect, they were really sluggish and appeared kind of dumb. But there was one patient who really terrified me. In contrast to most of the others, he was really intelligent, cultivated, attractive, and extremely charming. He was some kind of accountant before he got in the psychiatric hospital. Apparently, he had a competitor at work, which he killed, skinned partially of, and placed the corpse in the office to show the others what happens when you get in his way. After 10 years in the forensic psychiatry, he tortured his roommate to death at night over some minor argument. This dude really terrified me. I never met such a cold, manipulative character like him. He had this special, super creepy look on his face when he was alone with you, like he knew all your secrets and weaknesses. There was another really uneasy situation when I nearly shat my pants. Of course, it was during the night shift. Of course, our office was separated from the part of the building where the patients lived, and the only way out of the patients' area was through our office, which was highly secured with automatic locks, cameras, etc. 2 of my colleagues made their round to look after the patients. I stayed in the office and watched the surveillance cameras. Suddenly, I got an unsettling feeling. I looked out of the window, and in the reflection, I saw a woman hiding behind the door, watching me, smiling. I instantly jumped out of my chair and pressed the alarm button on my pager, even though the woman was one of the chilled patients. After we brought her back in her room, we tried to reconstruct how she might have got in there. But on the cameras, we saw nothing that could have explained that. Unfortunately, it was during my last days there, so I didn't find out what happened there in the end.
Now remember, keep your lights on and your doors locked. Then subscribe for more horrifying true stories.